Good morning, girls. It's such a beautiful day today, so I've decided to read this chapter outdoors, as you can see, to enjoy our beautiful spring day. So this chapter is called Mrs Pepperpot Minds the Baby. Now I'll tell you what happened the day Mrs Pepperpot was asked to mind the baby. It was early in the morning. Mrs Pepperpot had sent her husband off to work. In the usual way wives do, she had made the coffee and the sandwiches for his lunch, and had stood by the window and waved till he was out of sight. Then, just like other wives, she had gone back to bed to have a little extra shut-eye. Shut-eye is when you have a little bit of a nap, leaving all her housework for later. She had been sleeping a couple of hours when there was a knock at the door. She looked at the clock. "Good heavens!" she cried. "Have I slept so long?" She pulled her clothes on very quickly and ran to open the door. Who could it be? In the porch stood a lady with a little boy on her arm. "Forgive me for knocking," said the lady. "You're welcome," said Mrs Pepperpot. "You see," said the lady, "I'm staying with my aunt near here with my little boy, and today we simply have to go shopping in the town. I can't take Roger, and there's no one in the house to look after him." "Oh, that's all right," said Mrs Pepperpot. "I'll look after your little boy." To herself she thought, however will I manage with all that work and me oversleeping like that? Oh well, I shall have to do both at the same time. And here's a picture, girls. You can see Mrs Pepperpot answering the door and the lady with Roger in her arms. Then she said out loud, "Roger, come to Mrs Pepperpot. That's right." And she took the baby from the lady. "You don't need to give him a meal," said the lady. "I brought some apples. He can have when he starts sucking his fingers." "Very well," said Mrs Pepperpot, and put the apples in a dish on the sideboard. The lady said goodbye, and Mrs Pepperpot set the baby down on the rug in the sitting room. Then she went out into the kitchen to fetch her broom to start sweeping up. At that very moment, she shrank. Oh dear, whatever shall I do?" she wailed, for of course now she was much smaller than the baby. She gave up any idea of cleaning the house. When her husband came home, she would have to tell him that she had had a headache. "I must go and see what that little fellow is doing," she thought, as she climbed over the doorstep into the sitting room. Not a moment too soon, for Roger had crawled right across the floor and was just about to pull the tablecloth off the table, together with a pot of jam, a loaf of bread, and a big jug of coffee. Mrs Pepperpot lost no time. She knew it was too far for her to get to the table, so she pushed over a large silver cup, which was standing on the floor, waiting to be polished. Her husband had won it in a skiing competition years ago when he was young. The cup made a fine booming noise as it fell. The baby turned around and started crawling towards it. "That's right," said Mrs Pepperpot. "You play with that. At least you can't break it." But Roger wasn't after the silver cup. Gurgling, "Ha, Dolly, ha, Dolly," He made a beeline for Mrs Pepperpot. He thought she was a dolly because she was so small. And before she could get away, he had grabbed her by the waist. He jogged her up and down, and every time Mrs Pepperpot kicked and wriggled to get free, he laughed. "Eekoo, eekoo," he shouted, for she was tickling his hand with her feet. "Let go! Let go!" yelled Mrs Pepperpot. But Roger was used to his father shouting, "Let's go," when he threw him up in the air and caught him again. So Roger shouted, "Let go! Let go!" And he threw the little old woman up in the air with all the strength of his short arms. Mrs Pepperpot went up and up, nearly to the ceiling. Luckily she landed on the sofa, but she bounced several times before she could stop. "Talk of flying through the air with the greatest of ease," she gasped. "If that had happened to me in my normal size, I'd most likely have broken every bone in my body. Oh well, I'd better see what my little friend is up to now." She soon found out. Roger had got hold of a matchbox and was trying to strike a match. Luckily, he was using the wrong side of the box, but Mrs Pepperpot had to think very quickly indeed. Youngsters like to copy everything you do, so I'll take this nut and throw it at him. Then he'll throw it at me, I hope. She had found the nut in the sofa, and now she was in such a hurry to throw it, she forgot to aim properly. But it was a lucky shot, and it hit Roger just behind the ear, making him turn around. What else can I throw?" wondered Mrs Pepperpot. But there was no need, because the baby had seen her. He dropped the matchbox and started crawling towards the sofa. "Ha, Dolly! Ha, Dolly!" he gurgled delightfully. And now they started a very funny game of hide and seek. At least it was fun for Roger, but not quite so amusing for poor little old Mrs Pepperpot, who had to hide behind the cushions to get away from him. In the end, she managed to climb onto the sideboard where she kept a precious geranium in a pot. Geranium is a type of flower, girls. "Aha! You can't catch me now," she said, feeling much safer. But at that moment, the baby decided to go back to the matchbox. "No, no, no," shouted Mrs Pepperpot. Roger took no notice. So when she saw he was trying to strike another match, she put her back against the flower pot and gave it a push so that it fell to the floor with a crash. Roger immediately left the matchbox for this new and interesting mess of earth and bits of broken flower pot. He buried both his hands in it and started putting it in his mouth, gurgling, "Nice din din." There he is doing that very thing. "No, no, no," shouted Mrs Pepperpot once more. "Oh, whatever shall I do?" Her eye caught the apples left by Roger's mother. They were right beside her on the dish. One after the other, she rolled them over the edge, off the dish onto the floor. Roger watched them roll. Then he decided to chase them, forgetting his lovely meal of earth and broken flower pot. Soon the apples were all over the floor, and the baby was crawling happily from one to the other. There was a knock on the door. "Come in," said Mrs Pepperpot. Roger's mother opened the door and came in. And there was Mrs Pepperpot, large as life again, carrying a dustbin full of earth and broken bits in one hand and her broom in the other. "Has he been naughty?" asked the lady. "As good as gold," said Mrs Pepperpot. "We've had a high old time together, haven't we, Roger?" And she handed him back to his mother. "I'll have to take you home now, precious," said the lady. But the little fellow began to cry. "Ha, Dolly, ha, Dolly," he sobbed. "Have Dolly?" said his mother. "But you didn't bring a dolly. You don't even have one at home." She turned to Mrs Pepperpot. "I don't know what he means." "Oh, children say so many things grown-ups don't understand," said Mrs Pepperpot, and waved goodbye to Roger and his mother. Then she set up cleaning up her house. That's the end of the chapter there, girls. Well, Mrs Pepperpot has managed to get herself out of another spot of trouble. Let's have a look what we're going to do in our activity books, girls. In your activity book, girls, you turn to the page that says Mrs Pepperpot minds the baby at the top. And it looks like that with the pictures that came from the story. When I was reading the story, remember I showed you little pictures like that. So really, you're retelling little parts of the story. Look at the picture and see what's happening from the story. It can be one sentence about it in a proper sentence, girls. Don't forget a capital letter and a full stop and lovely neat writing sitting on the line. Looking forward to seeing your work, girls. Hope you enjoyed the story.